Hey guys! Tonight we wander slowly into one of the quietest archaeological surprises the modern world has ever stumbled across. You're standing in the countryside of northern China, not far from the ancient city of Xi'an, where the air carries a faint smell of dry soil and wheat stalks gently rustling in the wind. It's the early 1970s, and the farmland around you looks ordinary enough: patches of dusty earth, narrow paths worn by carts, and farmers moving at the slow rhythm of agricultural life that hasn't changed much in centuries. Nothing here suggests that beneath your feet lies one of the most astonishing discoveries in human history. But history loves a good surprise. You brush the dust from your hands and look out across the fields. Somewhere under this calm landscape rests an underground army, thousands of clay soldiers standing silently in formation. They've been waiting for more than 2,000 years, patiently guarding the tomb of a powerful emperor who believed death was simply another kingdom to rule. And if you were living here in ancient times, well, you probably wouldn't survive this story, not because of monsters or curses, but because the emperor responsible for this army had a habit of working people very, very hard. Let's just say the Qin dynasty was not famous for its generous vacation policies. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in tonight, feel free to leave a comment telling me your location and the local time where you're listening. I always love seeing how far these quiet little history journeys travel around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on land that has carried centuries of stories. Xi'an, known in ancient times as Chang'an, was once the heart of imperial China. For over 1,000 years, dynasties rose and fell here. Emperors ruled vast territories, and caravans packed with silk and spices set off toward the distant markets of the Silk Road. Today, though, the countryside feels peaceful. Farmers rise early, work the soil, and return home before sunset. Chickens wander lazily through the dirt. A bicycle rattles along a narrow path. Somewhere nearby, a radio hums softly with the faint crackle of music. It's hard to imagine that beneath these fields rests a construction project so enormous that historians still struggle to comprehend it. And yet the ground here has always held secrets. Chinese historical records from more than 2,000 years ago describe a massive tomb complex built for the first emperor of a unified China. According to the ancient historian Sima Xi'an, the emperor's burial site was filled with incredible treasures, rivers of flowing mercury, and mechanical traps designed to protect the tomb from intruders. Historians still argue whether all of these descriptions are literal truth or a bit of ancient storytelling flair. Sima Xi'an was writing about events that happened a century before his own lifetime, which means he was already working from second-hand reports. But even with that uncertainty, one thing seemed clear: the emperor's tomb was supposed to be enormous. The problem was, nobody knew exactly where it was. Over centuries, the landscape changed. Fields were plowed, villages appeared, and generations passed. The giant burial complex slowly disappeared beneath layers of soil and memory. Local people sometimes spoke of ancient ruins in the region, but nothing hinted at the scale of what lay hidden underground. If you're the sort of person who loses your keys in your own house, imagine misplacing an entire imperial burial complex. Still, subtle clues existed. Near Xi'an rises a large earthen mound that historians have long believed marks the resting place of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. The mound looks less like a tomb and more like a small hill, broad, grass-covered, and strangely quiet. Even today, archaeologists have never fully opened the emperor's central tomb chamber. That's partly because of the warnings in ancient texts about traps and dangerous substances inside. But the bigger reason is caution. Modern archaeologists know that opening a sealed tomb too quickly can destroy fragile artifacts before scientists even have time to study them. In other words, sometimes patience is the best tool in archaeology. But back in the early 1970s, nobody digging in these nearby fields expected to encounter anything connected to the emperor at all. You stroll slowly across the farmland as the afternoon sun warms the earth. The soil here is thick with loess, a fine yellowish dust that covers much of northern China. It's soft enough to dig, yet stable enough to preserve ancient structures for centuries. Perfect conditions, as it turns out, for hiding an army. Somewhere below your feet, rows of clay warriors stand in complete silence. Each one weighs hundreds of pounds. Each one has a different face. Their armor plates are sculpted in careful detail. Their hairstyles reflect military ranks from more than 2,000 years ago. But for now, nobody knows they're there. The farmers working this land are focused on much simpler concerns: weather, crops, water, and the occasional stubborn mule that refuses to cooperate. Life here moves at an unhurried pace. In fact, if you were to tell someone in the nearby village that an underground army larger than many modern stadium crowds is buried just a few meters below their crops, you'd probably get a polite nod, followed by the quiet assumption that you've been standing in the sun a bit too long. Yet history often waits patiently for exactly the right moment. And that moment arrives in the spring of 1974. A small group of farmers decides to dig a new well. It sounds like the least dramatic beginning possible for a world-famous discovery. There are no treasure maps, no secret scrolls, and definitely no archaeologists wearing dramatic hats like movie adventurers. Just farmers, shovels, and dry ground. But as you'll soon see, sometimes the most ordinary tasks lead to the most extraordinary finds. Because the first hint of the Terracotta Army doesn't appear as a full warrior emerging heroically from the soil. Instead, it begins with something much more puzzling. A broken piece of clay. The morning begins quietly, the way most mornings do in the countryside outside Xi'an. You wake to the faint crow of a rooster somewhere beyond the fields. The kind that clearly believes its job description includes announcing the sunrise to every living creature within a 5-kilometer radius. A thin veil of mist hangs low over the farmland, slowly lifting as the sun warms the dusty soil. You walk toward a patch of land where several farmers have gathered with shovels, wooden poles, and the determined expressions of people who know water doesn't magically appear on its own. Their plan is simple: dig a new well. In 1974, the region has been struggling with drought conditions, and water is precious. Digging a well isn't glamorous work. It involves long hours, aching backs, and the constant hope that eventually the earth will reward your effort with something more useful than rocks. You step onto the packed soil beside them. One man drives his shovel into the ground, turning up clumps of yellowish earth. Another clears loose dirt into baskets. It's repetitive work, the sort that lets your mind drift while your body keeps moving. Nothing about this scene feels historic. Yet, the land here has been farmed for centuries. Farmers often uncover small pieces of pottery while digging, fragments of bowls, jars, or roof tiles left behind by older villages. Finding bits of ancient ceramic is so common in parts of China that many villagers barely give it a second thought. Still, today feels slightly different. About a meter down, one of the farmers strikes something firm with his shovel. Not stone exactly. There's a hollow sort of knock, a sound that suggests something man-made. He kneels down, brushing away soil with his hands. What appears first is not a statue or a soldier. It's just a curved fragment of baked clay, the color of dusty brick. You crouch closer. The surface looks smooth and slightly reddish. It's thicker than ordinary pottery, and oddly shaped. One of the men tilts it in the sunlight. Maybe part of a pot, someone mutters. Another shrugs. Could be. But the piece feels heavier than it should. You turn it in your hands, noticing faint lines carved into the clay. They look almost like folds of fabric, or maybe armor plates. For a moment, Everyone stands quietly. Then the digging resumes. Because when you're trying to find water, mysterious pottery fragments are interesting, but they're not the priority. Over the next hour, more pieces appear. Another curved shard, a chunk shaped like part of a shoulder, something that almost resembles a human ear, though that sounds ridiculous when someone says it out loud. You hold the fragment up again. The ear really does look surprisingly lifelike. One of the farmers chuckles. If it's a statue, he jokes, it must have had a very large head. That's joke number 1 for the day. And honestly, it's not bad for a group of people standing in a dusty pit at 8 in the morning. But the deeper they dig, the stranger things become. Soon a larger section emerges, a piece that clearly forms part of a head. The clay surface shows carefully sculpted hair, arranged in a knot typical of ancient Chinese styles. The details are crisp despite centuries underground. Now everyone pauses. Because ordinary pottery does not usually come with hairstyles. You brush soil away from the fragment, revealing the curve of a cheekbone and the edge of a nose. The craftsmanship is impressive. Whoever made this piece knew exactly how to sculpt a human face. Mainstream history tells us that China has produced terracotta sculptures for thousands of years. Especially during the Qin and Han dynasties. Clay was cheap, durable, and easy to shape before firing. Small figurines were often buried in tombs to accompany the dead in the afterlife. But those were usually tiny, palm-sized. This piece feels bigger. Historians still argue whether the farmers immediately realized the importance of what they had found, or whether the discovery unfolded more gradually. Some accounts suggest they simply thought they had stumbled upon an old kiln or a collapsed shrine. Either way, curiosity starts to grow. More digging reveals additional fragments, pieces of legs, sections of armor, and what looks suspiciously like the bottom of a clay boot. You pick up the boot piece, brushing off the dust. It's clearly life-sized. And suddenly the earlier joke about a very large head doesn't seem quite so funny. One farmer scratches his chin. If that's a boot, he says slowly, where's the rest of the person? Good question. You glance down into the pit. The soil beneath your feet has been undisturbed for centuries. Yet scattered within it are these oddly human fragments. Another quirky detail soon appears. One of the men uncovers a bronze arrowhead buried near the clay pieces. It's greenish from oxidation but unmistakably sharp. Now the atmosphere changes slightly. Because this suggests something more than pottery. Ancient weapons often appear at archaeological sites connected to burials or battlefields. The Qin dynasty, which ruled China from 221 to 206 BCE, was famous for its powerful military. But again, nobody here jumps immediately to dramatic conclusions. After all, finding one arrowhead does not automatically mean you've discovered an entire army. Still, it does make you wonder. The farmers eventually report their discovery to local officials. In rural China during the 1970s, this usually means someone from the nearby county office comes to take a look and decide whether experts should be involved. At first, the situation seems minor. A few pottery fragments, possibly part of an ancient tomb. Interesting, but not exactly headline news. Yet when the first archaeologists arrive and begin examining the clay pieces, they quickly notice something remarkable. The fragments are not random. They belong to life-sized statues. And not just one statue. Many. Historians still argue whether the archaeologists realized immediately that they were standing on top of something enormous, or whether the true scale only became clear after further excavation. But one thing becomes obvious very quickly. Whatever lies beneath this field is far bigger than a simple tomb decoration. You step back from the growing pile of clay fragments. The farmers exchange quiet glances. No one says it aloud yet, but the feeling is starting to spread. There might be something very big underground. And if you listen closely to the soil beneath your boots, figuratively speaking, of course, you can almost imagine thousands of silent figures waiting patiently below. They've been standing there for more than 2,000 years. And thanks to one slightly unlucky well-digging project, their long, quiet wait is about to end. The fragments continue to emerge from the soil with the quiet persistence of a story that has waited a very long time to be told. You stand near the growing pile of clay pieces while the farmers keep digging. Their shovels moving slower now, guided by curiosity as much as by the hope of finding water. The earth here is cooperative in an archaeological sort of way. The lowest soil crumbles easily but holds its shape well enough to preserve buried objects. It's the same fine yellow dust that has settled across northern China for thousands of years, carried by winds from distant deserts. And for centuries, it has been protecting something extraordinary. Another section of clay appears, this one unmistakably part of a torso. The armor plates are carefully sculpted, arranged in neat overlapping rows. Tiny cords tying the armor together are visible in the clay, frozen mid-knot as if the sculptor stepped away only yesterday. You kneel closer to examine the detail. The craftsmanship is impressive even in broken pieces. Whoever made these figures clearly understood human anatomy, clothing, and military equipment. The armor looks functional, not decorative. Mainstream historians know that the Qin dynasty developed one of the most disciplined armies in ancient China. Soldiers were organized into strict ranks, with distinctive armor and weapons depending on their role. Crossbowmen, infantry, chariot drivers, all had specific equipment. And strangely enough, the clay fragments in front of you seem to reflect that organization. But right now, they're still just scattered puzzle pieces. One of the farmers lifts a larger chunk from the soil and turns it over carefully. It's part of a face, calm, expressionless, with a neatly shaped mustache and a strong jawline. You can't help noticing something odd. The face doesn't look generic. It looks individual. Historians still argue whether the sculptors of these warriors intentionally modeled each face to resemble real soldiers or whether they used a system of interchangeable molds combined with hand-carved details. The truth may lie somewhere in between, a sort of ancient assembly line where standardized parts were refined by skilled artists. Either way, the effect is striking. No two faces seem exactly alike. You brush a bit more dirt away from the clay cheek. The figure's expression feels oddly peaceful, not fierce or aggressive like you might expect from a warrior statue. More like someone calmly waiting in formation. Another curious discovery soon follows. As the farmers widen the pit, they uncover pieces of what appears to be a clay horse. The neck arches gracefully, the ears pricked forward, even broken. The sculpture carries a sense of motion. Now the group exchanges another round of thoughtful glances. Soldiers, horses, weapons. This is starting to look less like random tomb decoration and more like something military. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet possibility begins forming. But nobody says it aloud yet. The archaeologists who arrive soon after bring measuring tools, brushes, notebooks, and the sort of cautious excitement that professionals try to hide but never quite succeed in concealing. One of them carefully lifts a larger section of a statue from the ground. The clay is thick, fired hard in ancient kilns. Traces of reddish-brown pigment cling faintly to the surface, almost invisible under the dust. That detail surprises everyone. Because originally, these statues were not the plain gray figures we see today in museums. They were painted brightly. Ancient records and modern tests reveal that the warriors once wore vibrant colors, deep reds, purples, blues, and greens. Armor straps were painted black. Faces had lifelike skin tones. Some even had carefully detailed eyebrows and mustaches. Imagine an entire army of brightly colored soldiers standing underground. Not silent gray ghosts, but vivid figures that looked almost alive in torchlight. Unfortunately, The pigments turn out to be extremely fragile. Exposure to air causes many of the colors to fade within minutes of excavation. It's one of the small tragedies of archaeology. For 2,000 years, the paint survived underground, but sunlight and oxygen are far less forgiving. As the excavation continues, another fascinating tidbit emerges. Several bronze arrowheads are discovered in the soil near the clay figures. Unlike the statues, the metal weapons are still functional, even sharp. Researchers later discover something remarkable about these arrowheads. Many were produced using standardized molds, with inscriptions indicating workshop groups responsible for their manufacture. In other words, the Qin military industry had something resembling quality control 2,000 years ago. Which means if you were an ancient Qin factory worker producing arrowheads, you probably had supervisors checking your work, and possibly complaining about productivity. Some things never change. But the biggest realization arrives slowly. As archaeologists probe deeper into the soil, they begin uncovering sections of wooden beams, long decayed but still faintly visible in the ground as dark stains. These beams once supported a massive roof structure that covered the statues. And beneath that roof, rows. Long, straight rows. You brush away loose dirt and stare into the widening trench. There, partially buried, stands the upper body of a full warrior statue still attached to its legs. The figure stands about 6 feet tall, slightly taller than the average Qin soldier would have been. Its hands are positioned as if once holding a weapon. The stance is confident but calm. For a moment, the entire excavation site goes quiet. Because now the shape of the discovery becomes clear. This is not one statue. Not 10 statues. But many. Historians still argue whether the archaeologists immediately grasped the staggering scale of the site or whether that realization dawned slowly as the trenches expanded. But one thing is certain. The farmers who came here hoping to find water have accidentally uncovered the edge of something enormous. You look across the field, imagining what might lie beneath the rest of the soil. More soldiers? More horses? More rows stretching deeper underground? The wind moves softly through the wheat nearby, as if nothing unusual is happening at all. Yet just beneath the surface, an army that has stood silently for more than 20 centuries is beginning to return to the world above. And the deeper the excavation goes, the more astonishing the discovery becomes. Because these warriors are only the beginning. The field no longer feels like an ordinary stretch of farmland. Wooden stakes appear in neat lines across the soil, marking excavation grids. Measuring tapes stretch from one corner to another. Brushes, trowels, and notebooks are suddenly everywhere. You stand near the edge of the trench, watching as archaeologists work slowly and carefully, the way people do when they realize the ground beneath them may contain something irreplaceable. The farmers who first discovered the fragments still linger nearby. After all, it's not every day that digging a well accidentally summons an entire team of historians. The air carries a strange mix of excitement and caution. Because when archaeologists first arrive at a site like this, they face a delicate balance. Move too quickly and you risk destroying fragile artifacts. Move too slowly and curious onlookers might start digging on their own. Neither option is ideal. So the excavation begins methodically. You kneel beside one archaeologist as she gently brushes soil away from the partially exposed warrior discovered earlier. The clay surface appears gradually, first the helmet-like hairstyle, then the shoulders, then the sculpted armor plates. With each careful stroke of the brush, the figure emerges a little more. It's oddly peaceful to watch. No dramatic music, no rushing, just patient work and the quiet scratching sound of bristles against dirt. Finally, the upper body of the statue is fully revealed. The warrior stands upright, his expression calm and slightly distant, as though he's been waiting a very long time for someone to say hello. Mainstream historians now know that these statues date back to the reign of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor who unified China in 221 BCE. His rule marked the end of the chaotic warring states period and the beginning of a centralized imperial system. He standardized currency, weights, and even the width of cart axles so roads could function efficiently. And apparently, he also decided that his afterlife required a personal army. But in 1974, standing here in the field, the archaeologists don't yet know the full scale of what they've uncovered. They only know one thing for certain. This statue is life-sized. You watch as several workers carefully clear the soil around the legs. The warrior's boots appear next, thick-soled, detailed with carved stitching. The stance suggests readiness, as if he's prepared to march forward at any moment. But he never will. 2,000 years of quiet waiting have frozen him exactly where he stands. Another archaeologist steps closer, examining the sculpture's face. "That's remarkable," he murmurs. The facial features are strikingly realistic. High cheekbones, narrow eyes, a slight mustache carefully sculpted above the lip. Historians still argue whether these faces were meant to represent real soldiers or idealized versions of Qin warriors. Some believe artisans modeled the statues after actual members of the imperial army. Others suggest that a set of standardized molds created basic shapes, which craftsmen then personalized by hand. Either way, the result is extraordinary. Standing in front of this warrior, you don't feel like you're looking at a simple statue. It feels like a person who has paused mid-duty. Another section of the trench begins revealing additional figures. One after another, clay heads appear beneath the soil like quiet spectators rising slowly from the earth. A shoulder here, a helmet there. Before long, several warriors stand partially uncovered, all facing the same direction. Forward. Always forward. This arrangement catches the attention of the archaeologists immediately. Because soldiers standing in formation usually mean one thing: an army. You step back and look across the trench. The rows are becoming clearer now. Long lines of statues positioned with surprising precision. And then comes another discovery. Near the front of the formation, archaeologists uncover something different: the remains of a wooden chariot. The wood itself has mostly decayed after centuries underground, but metal fittings and wheel impressions remain. Bronze pieces that once connected the structure still lie in place, green with age. Nearby, the clay heads of horses begin to appear. Their ears stand upright, nostrils flared slightly as if caught mid-breath. Now the scene becomes even more vivid. Soldiers, chariots, horses. This is not just decoration. It's a military formation. One of the archaeologists quietly remarks that the layout resembles battle lines used during the Qin dynasty. Infantry in the front, chariots positioned strategically behind, supporting units arranged in careful rows. It's almost as if someone buried an entire battlefield beneath the ground. A quirky detail soon catches everyone's attention. Many of the warriors are slightly taller than the average Qin soldier would have been. Some stand nearly 6.5 feet tall. Historians believe this may have been intentional. In ancient art across many cultures, rulers often portrayed their soldiers as larger and more impressive than reality. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of heroic movie posters. Another light joke circulates among the team. If these were real soldiers, one worker says with a grin, the emperor must have had the tallest army in history. But behind the humor lies genuine amazement. The excavation trench continues expanding. More warriors appear. Dozens now. Each one standing in silence. Weapons once held in clay hands. Eyes fixed toward an invisible horizon. And as the archaeologists slowly widen the dig site, the realization spreads quietly through the group. This field may contain not just a handful of statues, but thousands. The thought is almost impossible to grasp. Because if the rows continue beyond the trench, if the entire area beneath the farmland is filled with figures like these, then the farmers digging their well may have uncovered one of the greatest archaeological sites ever found. You glance across the quiet countryside again. The wheat sways gently in the breeze. Birds drift across the pale sky. And beneath this peaceful landscape, an emperor's silent army is beginning to awaken from 2,000 years of darkness. The trench grows wider with each passing day, and the quiet farmland begins to transform into something that looks almost like a giant open window into the past. You stand near the edge, watching the careful rhythm of excavation. Brushes sweeping dust aside, small wooden tools scraping gently at the soil, notebooks filling with measurements and sketches. The warriors continue appearing. At first it's only a handful, then a dozen, then several rows stretching farther than anyone expected. Each time another statue emerges from the ground, it brings the same quiet moment of disbelief. Because no matter how many you uncover, the next one still feels surprising. You walk slowly along the edge of the excavation pit, peering down into the growing formation. The soldiers stand shoulder to shoulder in neat lines, all facing the same direction as if awaiting orders that never arrived. Up close, the individuality becomes even more striking. One warrior has a long, narrow face with a carefully trimmed mustache. Another has rounder cheeks and a faint smile that gives him a surprisingly relaxed expression for someone supposedly guarding an emperor's tomb. Their hairstyles differ too. Some wear their hair tied into tight topknots. Others have caps or simple headgear. Historians now recognize that these hairstyles actually reflected military ranks during the Qin dynasty. High-ranking officers had more elaborate headwear, while ordinary infantrymen wore simpler styles. In other words, even underground, the chain of command still matters. You crouch closer to one statue whose head has been fully uncovered. The sculptor captured tiny details, the folds of the eyelids, the curve of the ears, even subtle wrinkles beside the mouth. Historians still argue whether the artisans working on this project ever imagined that people thousands of years later would examine their work this closely. If they did, they probably hoped their supervisor wouldn't notice that one slightly crooked eyebrow. Another fascinating detail soon becomes clear. The warriors are not hollow statues made in one piece. Instead, they were constructed in sections. Legs formed solid bases, while torsos were hollow cylinders attached above. Arms were added separately, and heads were sculpted individually. It's almost like ancient modular engineering. Scholars believe this method allowed craftsmen to produce large numbers of statues efficiently while still giving each one unique features. Workshops likely specialized in different parts, some making legs, others torsos, others heads. Think of it as a very early production line, except instead of assembling cars, you're assembling life-sized soldiers made of clay. And probably working under the watchful eye of imperial inspectors who were not known for their relaxed attitudes. Meanwhile, the excavation continues, revealing something even more impressive. The warriors are arranged in long corridors separated by earthen walls. These corridors once had wooden roofs supported by large beams. Over the beams, layers of reed mats and packed soil sealed the structure underground. Historians believe this roof system helped protect the army for centuries, but it also means that when parts of the roof eventually collapsed long ago, many statues were shattered beneath falling debris. That explains the fragments you saw earlier. You notice archaeologists carefully reconstructing broken figures like giant three-dimensional puzzles. A torso here, an arm there, a head placed gently back where it belongs. It takes patience. Sometimes dozens of fragments must be matched together before a single warrior can stand again. One worker jokes quietly that the ancient sculptors never expected someone in the future to spend months reassembling their statues like a gigantic jigsaw puzzle. Still, the results are remarkable. Gradually, the warriors begin standing again in their original positions. And when several rows are restored side by side, the effect is breathtaking. Hundreds of silent soldiers, all facing forward. You feel a strange sensation walking along the edge of the pit, almost as if you're being observed by thousands of calm clay faces. Don't worry though, none of them blink. That would definitely be the moment archaeologists reconsider their career choices. But thankfully, the warriors remain peacefully still. Another curious discovery soon emerges among the statues. Some of the warriors' hands are shaped to hold specific weapons, spears, halberds, crossbows, yet in many cases, the weapons themselves are missing. At first this puzzles researchers. Where did the weapons go? Eventually they discover the answer scattered throughout the site. Many real bronze weapons were buried alongside the statues. Over centuries, some were removed or decayed, but thousands still remain. In fact, archaeologists later recover more than 40,000 bronze arrowheads from the pits. Yes, 40,000. That's enough ammunition to make any ancient general feel extremely confident about their battle strategy. One quirky tidbit that fascinates researchers is the advanced metallurgy of these weapons. Many bronze blades show traces of chromium coating, which helped protect them from corrosion. Historians still debate exactly how this coating occurred. Some believe it was an intentional chemical treatment. Others argue it resulted from nearby lacquer used on wooden weapon handles. Either way, it's an impressive bit of ancient technology. But perhaps the most extraordinary realization arrives slowly as the excavation expands outward. More pits appear. More corridors. More rows of warriors stretching far into the soil. You stand at the edge of the growing site and imagine the scene as it once looked when completed more than 2,000 years ago. Not a scattered group of statues, but an entire underground army standing in formation. Thousands of soldiers, hundreds of horses, chariots ready for battle, all arranged as if guarding something even more important behind them. Because somewhere beyond this army lies the tomb of the emperor who ordered their creation. A ruler powerful enough to unify China, and ambitious enough to command an army that would follow him even into the afterlife. You linger at the edge of the excavation while the silent warriors continue emerging from the earth. And your thoughts begin drifting backward through time, far beyond the dusty farmland, far beyond the quiet villages surrounding Xi'an, all the way to the turbulent centuries before this army was ever imagined. Because somewhere in that distant past lives the man responsible for all of this. The emperor behind the army. His name was Ying Zheng, though history remembers him better by the title he later gave himself, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of Qin. You imagine standing in ancient China around the year 260 BCE. The land is divided among several rival kingdoms, each constantly plotting against the others. Historians call this period the Warring States era, which is exactly as relaxing as it sounds. Cities are fortified, armies march frequently, diplomats carry messages between courts that are sometimes polite invitations and sometimes thinly disguised threats. Into this world, the young prince Ying Zheng is born. He becomes king of the Qin state at only 13 years old. At that age, most teenagers today are still figuring out algebra and arguing about bedtime. But Ying Zheng suddenly finds himself at the center of royal politics. Luckily for him, and perhaps less luckily for everyone else, Qin already possesses one of the most efficient and disciplined military systems in China. For years, Qin generals have been refining strategies, building roads for troop movement, and training soldiers with strict organization. Their crossbows are powerful, their infantry well-equipped, and their commanders extremely ambitious. You could say the kingdom has been preparing for something big. As Ying Zheng grows older, he gradually takes full control of the government. And when he does, He begins pursuing a goal that had previously seemed impossible: unifying all of China. Campaign after campaign follows. Qin armies march eastward, defeating rival states one by one. Han falls first, then Zhao, then Wei, Chu, Yan, and finally Qi. By 221 BCE, for the first time in history, the entire region we now call China is ruled by a single emperor. Ying Zheng celebrates this achievement by giving himself a new title, Qin Shi Huang, which literally means First August Emperor of Qin. It's a bold name, but if you've just unified several kingdoms after centuries of warfare, a little confidence is understandable. Mainstream history credits Qin Shi Huang with several enormous reforms. He standardizes Chinese writing across the empire so officials from different regions can communicate easily. He standardizes coins, weights, and measurements to improve trade. He even orders roads built to connect distant provinces, forming a network that stretches thousands of kilometers. Some historians also connect his reign to early construction projects that later evolved into the Great Wall of China. Although to be fair, the Great Wall we see today mostly comes from later dynasties. Qin Shi Huang's version was more like a collection of defensive walls stitched together into a giant northern fence. Still impressive, though. But for all his achievements, Qin Shi Huang also develops a reputation for, let's call it, intense determination. Ancient sources describe him as deeply concerned with immortality. Like many rulers throughout history, he becomes fascinated by the idea of living forever, which, if you think about it, is the ultimate long-term retirement plan. Historians record that he sent expeditions across the seas searching for mythical islands where immortality herbs supposedly grew. One famous legend claims he dispatched a fleet led by an alchemist named Xu Fu, who sailed east with hundreds of young people to search for the magical elixir. According to some stories, Xu Fu never returned. Some Japanese traditions even suggest he may have settled in Japan. Historians still argue whether this tale is fact, exaggeration, or simply ancient gossip traveling a very long distance. Either way, the emperor's obsession with the afterlife becomes clear in another enormous project: his tomb. Construction of the imperial burial complex reportedly begins soon after he becomes king as a teenager. According to the historian Sima Xi'an, more than 700,000 laborers work on the project over many years. 700,000. That's a workforce large enough to build an entire city. You imagine the scene. Thousands of workers hauling earth, shaping clay, carving stone, and constructing enormous underground chambers beneath what will eventually become the emperor's burial mound. And somewhere within that project, someone proposes a remarkable idea. If the emperor expects to rule in the afterlife, he will need protection. Not symbolic protection. Real protection. An army. Of course, burying real soldiers with the emperor would be extremely unpopular among the soldiers themselves. Earlier Chinese rulers sometimes sacrificed servants or guards in tomb burials, but by the Qin dynasty this practice was already fading. So instead, the emperor chooses something more creative. Clay warriors. Life-sized. Thousands of them. You glance again at the silent rows in the excavation pit, each figure standing patiently where ancient artisans placed them more than 2 millennia ago. Historians still debate how much Qin Shi Huang personally directed the design of the Terracotta Army. Did he demand exact military formations? Did he approve the sculptural details? Or did his architects and craftsmen develop the concept themselves while working on the larger tomb complex? The records don't give us a clear answer. But one thing seems certain. When the emperor eventually passed away in 210 BCE, he believed his underground kingdom was fully prepared. His tomb sealed. His clay army ready. His afterlife protected by thousands of silent guardians standing just beyond the burial chamber. And for more than 2,000 years, they remained exactly where he left them, waiting quietly beneath the soil, until a group of farmers searching for water accidentally knocked on the door of history. You imagine the countryside around Xi'an more than 2,000 years ago, long before tractors, paved roads, or the quiet hum of distant motorcycles. The land is busy with a different kind of activity. Thousands of laborers moving across a massive construction site that stretches farther than the eye can comfortably follow. This is not a single tomb being built. It is an underground empire. The burial complex of Qin Shi Huang spreads across dozens of square kilometers. At the center lies the great earthen mound that will eventually cover the emperor's tomb chamber. But surrounding it are layers of carefully designed structures, corridors, storage pits, sacrificial chambers, and the vast military formations that will become the Terracotta Army. You walk through the imagined construction site in your mind. Workers haul baskets of soil on shoulder poles. Kilns burn day and night, firing clay pieces that will become parts of statues. Supervisors pace the site, occasionally glancing at scrolls containing measurements and instructions. If this were a modern construction project, someone would probably complain about the noise permits. But here, the noise is constant and expected. Mainstream historians estimate that the construction of the emperor's tomb complex lasted roughly 36 years, beginning when Qin Shi Huang first became king and continuing until his death in 210 BCE. 36 years. That's long enough for entire generations of workers to grow up around the project. Ancient texts describe enormous workshops operating near the site. Craftsmen produce bronze weapons, lacquered wood pieces, pottery vessels, and countless structural components. Some workers specialize in shaping clay limbs for the statues. Others carve facial features or mold armor plates. Archaeologists have even discovered inscriptions on certain terracotta figures indicating which workshop produced them. In other words, ancient quality control. Imagine an imperial supervisor examining a finished statue and muttering, this mustache seems slightly crooked. Back to workshop 3. It's the sort of workplace pressure that might encourage very careful mustache sculpting. But the scale of the Terracotta Army itself is staggering. Historians estimate that around 8,000 soldiers were originally placed in the pits. Alongside them stood about 130 chariots, 520 horses pulling those chariots, and roughly 150 cavalry horses positioned separately. And remember, this entire army was buried underground. The pits themselves were built like enormous trenches. Workers first dug long corridors into the earth. Then they constructed earthen walls between the corridors, creating narrow passageways where the warriors would stand. Wooden beams formed roofs above these corridors, covered with layers of reed mats and packed soil. Once the statues were placed inside, the entire structure was sealed and hidden beneath the ground. If you were walking across the land after construction ended, you might never guess an army waited beneath your feet. The soldiers themselves were positioned with remarkable strategic awareness. Infantry filled the front ranks. Behind them stand additional units ready to support the line. Chariots occupy important positions where commanders could oversee the battlefield. Historians still argue whether the army represents a real Qin military formation or a symbolic version meant for ceremonial protection. But either way, the arrangement is far from random. Even the directions matter. Most of the warriors face east. That detail fascinates researchers. Why east? Some scholars suggest the emperor feared enemies from the eastern regions of his former rival states. Positioning his army to face that direction could symbolically guard against those threats even in the afterlife. Others believe the orientation simply reflects military traditions of the time. Either way, thousands of clay soldiers stand ready as if awaiting a battle that will never come. Another quirky tidbit emerges from the archaeological evidence. Some statues appear to have originally held real weapons, bronze swords, spears, crossbows, These weapons were functional, not decorative. If the emperor truly expected to rule an afterlife kingdom, he apparently intended his army to be properly armed. One of the most famous weapons discovered at the site is a bronze sword that remained astonishingly sharp after more than 2,000 years underground. When archaeologists first uncovered it, the blade reportedly flexed slightly under pressure and then returned perfectly to its original shape. That kind of resilience would make any modern sword enthusiast quietly jealous. But perhaps the most impressive element of the army is its sheer individuality. As you stroll mentally through the rows, you notice how each face seems slightly different. Some warriors appear young and smooth-faced. Others have thicker eyebrows or deeper lines around the mouth. Several sport carefully styled mustaches or short beards. Their expressions vary too: calm, focused, even slightly bored. And honestly, if you've been standing guard for 2,000 years, a little boredom is understandable. Historians still debate whether the sculptors deliberately modeled the warriors after real soldiers in Qin Shi Huang's army. If so, the pits might represent not just a symbolic force but a clay portrait gallery of the emperor's actual military. Others argue that artisans used a set of standardized molds combined with hand-carved details to create variety without needing thousands of separate designs. The truth may lie somewhere between those possibilities. What's clear is that these craftsmen achieved something extraordinary. They created a vast army where no two faces appear exactly the same. And they did it without computers, modern factories, or even reliable coffee breaks. You imagine the final stage of the construction project. The statues stand in formation. The roofs are sealed above them. Soil covers the pits until the entire army disappears beneath the ground. Nearby, the emperor's central tomb waits quietly beneath its great mound. When Qin Shi Huang dies in 210 BCE during a journey across his empire, his body is returned to this burial complex. The underground kingdom is sealed, and the Terracotta Army begins its long, silent watch. For more than 2,000 years, no human eyes will see these warriors again, until a farmer's shovel finally taps against something strange beneath the soil. You stand quietly beside the excavation pit, watching archaeologists slowly brush away layers of soil from another warrior's shoulder. The clay surface appears grain by grain, like a photograph developing in slow motion. It's oddly calming to watch, patient, deliberate work that rewards attention rather than speed. And as more statues emerge from the ground, a question naturally rises. How did ancient craftsmen manage to build thousands of these warriors? Because sculpting even one life-sized human figure requires skill, sculpting 8,000 requires something closer to industrial organization. You imagine stepping back through time again, walking through the workshops that once surrounded the emperor's burial complex. The air smells of clay, smoke, and the faint sharp scent of kiln fires burning day and night. Rows of workers sit at wooden tables shaping pieces of damp clay. One group forms legs, solid columns that will support the statues. Another group shapes hollow torsos, smoothing the surfaces carefully. Elsewhere, artisans sculpt arms and hands, leaving curved openings where bronze weapons will later rest. It's almost like an ancient assembly line. Mainstream historians now believe the warriors were produced using a clever combination of molds and handcrafting. Basic parts, legs, torsos, arms, could be made in standardized forms. Then skilled sculptors would add the details that gave each soldier individuality. Hair strands carved with thin tools, eyelids shaped carefully with fingertips, armor plates etched with patterns. Historians still argue exactly how many molds were used in this process. Some estimates suggest around 10 different head molds formed the base shapes. From there, artists modified the features to create distinct faces. It's a bit like baking thousands of cookies with the same cutter, but decorating each one differently. Except these cookies weigh several hundred pounds. Another fascinating detail appears when archaeologists examine the inside of the statues. Many torsos contain fingerprints left behind by the ancient craftsmen who shaped them. Real fingerprints. 2,000 years old. You pause to imagine that moment. A worker pressing wet clay into shape, leaving behind the subtle whorls of their hand. They probably never expected someone centuries later to notice. In a strange way, it's one of the most personal connections we have to the builders of the Terracotta Army. No names. No portraits. Just fingerprints hidden inside clay soldiers. Meanwhile, other workshops near the construction site focus on something equally important. Weapons. Bronze spearheads, arrowheads, swords, and crossbow triggers are produced in enormous quantities. Archaeologists later discovered thousands of these items scattered among the statues. One particularly interesting discovery involves the arrowheads. Researchers found that many arrowheads were produced in batches by specific workshops, each marked with tiny inscriptions. These marks acted almost like factory stamps identifying the responsible group of workers. In other words, ancient quality control again. Imagine an imperial supervisor inspecting a pile of arrowheads and saying, Workshop 5, we need to talk about your consistency. It turns out even ancient empires liked organized paperwork. Another group of craftsmen focuses on the horses. The terracotta horses are slightly smaller than real horses but still impressively detailed. Their muscular necks curve gracefully, and their ears stand alert. Each horse once pulled a wooden chariot fitted with bronze components. Historians believe the chariots themselves were largely made of wood, which explains why many of them decayed over time while the clay figures survived. Still, enough metal parts remain to reconstruct how they looked. Standing beside the restored formations today, you can almost picture the chariots rolling across an ancient battlefield. Except these chariots never moved. They were built solely to accompany the emperor into the afterlife. Another quirky tidbit involves the original paint that covered the statues. Before burial, each warrior was brightly colored. Their robes displayed vivid reds and greens. Armor straps were painted black. Faces carried natural skin tones, complete with carefully drawn eyebrows. Imagine walking into the underground pits when the statues were new. Instead of the gray clay figures we see today, you would encounter an entire army glowing with color under flickering torchlight. It must have been an extraordinary sight. Unfortunately, the pigments were extremely delicate. When archaeologists first exposed the statues to air in the 1970s, many colors faded almost immediately. Some pigments curled and flaked away within minutes. Scientists now study ways to preserve any remaining traces before excavation continues in new areas. It's one of the many reminders that archaeology sometimes involves difficult choices. Do you reveal the past and risk damaging it? Or leave it buried where time has protected it for centuries? Historians still debate how much of the Terracotta Army should remain underground until preservation techniques improve. Because even today, parts of the site remain unexcavated. You glance across the vast excavation hall that now covers the main pit. Rows upon rows of warriors stretch into the distance like frozen waves of soldiers. And you realize something remarkable. Every one of these figures was made by human hands. Thousands of craftsmen. Thousands of hours. All to create an army that would never fight a battle. Instead, it would stand silently in darkness for more than 20 centuries. Until one unexpected moment in 1974 when a farmer's shovel uncovered the first small piece of clay. And the world slowly began to rediscover the emperor's underground army. You continue walking slowly along the edge of the excavation hall. And by now the quiet rows of warriors feel almost familiar. At first they seemed mysterious, even a little eerie, but after spending time among them, the atmosphere begins to feel more like a silent military camp paused mid-march. Except this camp hasn't moved in more than 2,000 years. From above, The layout of the main pit becomes easier to understand. The corridors stretch in long straight lines separated by thick earthen walls. Between those walls stand the warriors, arranged with remarkable discipline. The more archaeologists study the site, the clearer it becomes that this army wasn't placed randomly. It follows military logic. The front rows are filled with infantry soldiers, lightly armored figures positioned as the first line of defense. They stand closest to the eastern edge of the pit, facing outward as if guarding the entire burial complex. Behind them stand additional rows of infantry in deeper formations. Further back still are the chariots. You picture them in their original state, wooden chariots mounted on large wheels, each pulled by a team of clay horses. Drivers would have stood ready, hands gripping reins, while soldiers beside them prepared bows or spears. Even though the wooden parts have mostly vanished, the bronze fittings and terracotta horses still hint at their former presence. Historians now believe the main pit, known as Pit 1, represents a full battle formation. It stretches roughly 230 meters long and 62 meters wide, making it larger than many modern football stadiums. If you tried to count the soldiers row by row, you'd probably give up somewhere around the 500th warrior. And yet there are still more. The army doesn't end here. Additional pits nearby reveal other units with different roles. Pit 2 contains a mix of cavalry, chariots, and archers arranged in complex formations. Archaeologists believe this pit represents a flexible military reserve force, ready to support the main infantry lines. You imagine the archers standing quietly in rows, crossbows raised. Their clay hands still hold the shapes where weapons once rested. It's almost as if someone paused the battle just before the first arrow flew. Then there's Pit 3, smaller but equally intriguing. Historians think this pit served as the command center of the army. Several statues of high-ranking officers stand there, positioned around what appears to have been a chariot used by a commanding general. If Pit 1 is the battlefield, Pit 3 might be the headquarters tent. Except this headquarters is buried underground forever. One fascinating detail catches your attention when looking closely at the warrior's armor. Not all soldiers wear the same protection. Some figures have thick armor plates covering their torsos and shoulders. Others wear lighter gear or no armor at all. Historians believe these variations reflect real differences in rank and battlefield roles. Heavily armored soldiers likely served as elite units. Light infantry moved faster and carried fewer protective pieces. Even footwear varies. Certain warriors wear sturdy boots suitable for long marches, while others wear lighter shoes that might have allowed more flexibility during combat. It's an incredible level of realism for statues meant to guard a tomb. Historians still argue whether the Terracotta Army was meant purely as a symbolic guard force or whether Qin Shi Huang believed the statues would somehow come alive to defend him in the afterlife. Ancient Chinese beliefs about the spirit world often imagined a continuation of earthly life beyond death. Tombs were frequently stocked with objects the deceased might need: tools, food vessels, even miniature houses. But Qin Shi Huang took that tradition to a truly enormous scale. Instead of small figurines, he ordered an entire army. Another surprising discovery appears when archaeologists examine the bronze weapons found among the statues. Many swords are incredibly well preserved, their blades still sharp even after centuries underground. Some even show signs of chromium compounds on their surfaces, which may have helped protect the metal from corrosion. Historians still debate exactly how this protective layer formed. Some believe it was an intentional treatment developed by Qin metallurgists. Others think the chromium came from nearby lacquer used to coat wooden weapon parts. Either way, the result is impressive. Imagine discovering a sword buried since the 3rd century BCE that still looks battle-ready. One archaeologist reportedly joked that if the warriors ever decided to march again, they'd be well equipped. Thankfully, The soldiers remain firmly committed to their long-standing policy of standing perfectly still. As you walk along the viewing platform above the pit, your eyes follow the endless rows stretching into the distance. The scale of the project becomes overwhelming. Thousands of statues, hundreds of weapons, carefully planned formations, all designed to protect a single emperor after death. It makes you wonder what Qin Shi Huang imagined his afterlife would be like. Did he picture himself ruling another empire beneath the earth, holding court while his clay soldiers guarded the gates? Historians still debate how literally ancient rulers believed in these burial preparations. Some scholars argue the tomb complex served more as a symbol of imperial power than a genuine expectation of afterlife governance. Others believe Qin Shi Huang may have taken the idea very seriously indeed. Either way, the result is undeniable. Beneath the soil near Xi'an, an entire army was built, organized, armed, and buried. And for more than 2,000 years, it waited in silent formation. Not marching, not fighting, just standing patiently until the modern world finally stumbled across it again. You pause for a moment along the viewing platform, letting your eyes drift across the endless rows of silent warriors. By now the formation feels almost familiar, like visiting a quiet military parade that somehow paused 2,000 years ago and never quite resumed. But as the calm settles in, another thought slowly surfaces. If this army was built with such care, why did it disappear from history for so long? Because for centuries after the Qin dynasty ended, the Terracotta Army was almost completely forgotten. To understand how that happened, you have to travel back to the moment when Qin Shi Huang's empire began to unravel. The emperor dies in 210 BCE during a long journey across his empire. According to ancient records, his death is kept secret for a time by court officials who fear political chaos. One rather unusual detail appears in the historical accounts. Officials allegedly placed carts of rotting fish near the emperor's carriage to disguise the smell of his body during the long return journey to the capital. It's not exactly the most glamorous moment in imperial history. Historians still argue whether this story is entirely accurate or partly exaggerated by later writers. But it does capture the tense atmosphere surrounding the emperor's final days. Because once news of his death spreads, the empire quickly becomes unstable. Qin Shi Huang's son, Qin Shi, takes the throne. Unfortunately for him, and the dynasty, he lacks his father's political skill and authority. Rebellions begin appearing across the empire. Former rival states see an opportunity to reclaim independence. Peasant uprisings break out as heavy taxes and forced labor during the Qin era spark widespread resentment. Within just a few years, the once powerful Qin dynasty collapses. The Han dynasty soon rises to replace it, bringing a new era of stability and cultural development. But in the process, many of the grand projects built under Qin rule fall into neglect, including the emperor's burial complex. Ancient historian Sima Xi'an later records that the tomb of Qin Shi Huang was sealed after the burial ceremony. Workers who knew the layout of the chambers were allegedly trapped inside to keep the tomb's secrets safe. That story sounds dramatic, and historians still debate whether it's literally true or simply a cautionary legend about imperial secrecy. Either way, the burial complex eventually disappears beneath layers of soil and vegetation. And then something unexpected happens. A fire. Archaeological evidence suggests that parts of the Terracotta Army pits suffered damage not long after the emperor's death. Burn marks appear on the soil layers above certain sections, and the wooden roof beams that once covered the corridors seem to have burned before collapsing. Historians suspect the destruction may have occurred during the chaotic rebellions that ended the Qin dynasty. One rebel leader, Shang Yu, reportedly looted the imperial tomb complex and burned structures in the area. Historians still argue whether his forces were responsible for the fires that damaged the Terracotta Army pits. But the evidence suggests that something dramatic happened soon after the emperor's burial. The wooden roofs collapsed. Heavy soil fell inward. Many statues shattered under the weight of debris. The once orderly corridors became tangled fields of broken clay figures. And gradually, over centuries, wind and dust covered everything again. Nature quietly erased the surface signs of the enormous project. Grass grew. Fields returned. Villages appeared. By the time later generations lived in the region, the Terracotta Army had become little more than a rumor. Local folklore sometimes mentioned ancient ruins beneath the ground. Farmers occasionally discovered fragments of pottery while plowing. But without large-scale excavation, the full truth remained hidden. Even scholars studying ancient Chinese texts struggled to identify the exact location of the emperor's tomb complex. They knew the burial mound existed near Xi'an. They knew historical accounts described incredible underground chambers filled with treasures. But the surrounding army remained lost. Imagine that for a moment. One of the largest archaeological creations in human history. Thousands of life-sized statues arranged in military formation, resting quietly beneath farmland for more than 2,000 years. And almost no one realizing it was there. You look again across the excavation pit. The warriors now stand restored in many sections, their rows stretching beneath the enormous protective building constructed over the site. Tourists walk along elevated pathways, peering down at the formations just as you are now. Yet for most of history, these figures stood alone in darkness. No footsteps, no voices, just silent clay soldiers waiting beneath the soil. And the strange thing is, the world almost never rediscovered them. If those farmers in 1974 had chosen a slightly different place to dig their well, the Terracotta Army might still be hidden today, still standing in perfect formation beneath quiet farmland, still guarding an emperor who believed his power would last forever. Instead, history eventually nudged the secret back into the light. And once the first few fragments appeared, the rest of the army slowly followed. The countryside around Xi'an feels calm again as you imagine the centuries quietly passing over the buried army. The fires that damaged the wooden roofs have long cooled. The collapsed soil has settled. And the once grand construction site has slowly blended back into the natural landscape. Grass spreads across the ground. Wind drifts across the fields. Generations come and go without realizing what rests beneath their feet. Yet the memory of the emperor's tomb never disappears entirely. Instead, it survives in whispers, legends, and fragments of historical writing that scholars puzzle over for centuries. The most famous account comes from the ancient historian Xi'an, whose work Records of the Grand Historian describes the burial of Qin Shi Huang in remarkable detail. Writing during the early Han Dynasty, about a century after the emperor's death, Xi'an paints a vivid picture of the underground tomb. According to his description, the emperor's burial chamber was designed as a miniature version of his empire. Palaces and towers were built inside the tomb. Rivers and seas were simulated using flowing mercury. The ceiling was decorated with pearls representing the stars of the night sky. If you were to believe every line of the account, the emperor's tomb was essentially an underground universe. Historians still argue whether these descriptions are completely accurate or somewhat exaggerated. Ancient writers often blended factual observation with storytelling flair, especially when describing imperial projects. But modern science has provided an intriguing clue. In recent decades, researchers studying the soil around the emperor's burial mound detected unusually high concentrations of mercury in the area. That discovery startled many scholars. Because if mercury really exists in large quantities inside the tomb, it could support Xi'an's story about flowing rivers of mercury, meant to symbolize China's great waterways. Of course, mercury also happens to be extremely toxic, which might explain why archaeologists have been extremely cautious about opening the central burial chamber. For now, the tomb mound itself remains largely untouched. It sits quietly about a kilometer away from the Terracotta Army pits, rising like a grassy hill in the landscape. Visitors often expect something more dramatic, perhaps a stone pyramid or elaborate monument. Instead, it looks surprisingly simple. Just a large mound covered in trees and grass. Sometimes the most important historical sites hide behind the most ordinary appearances. Meanwhile, local legends about the area continue circulating through the centuries. Some villagers believe treasures lie buried beneath the hills. Others claim ancient spirits guard the emperor's tomb. You can imagine farmers telling these stories around evening fires. The way people everywhere pass down mysterious tales connected to unusual places. "Don't dig too deep near that hill," someone might say quietly. "There are old things sleeping there." Of course, many such stories exist around historical ruins, and most turn out to be little more than folklore. Still, they add a layer of quiet intrigue to the region. One quirky tradition even suggests that strange lights occasionally appeared near the burial mound at night, glowing faintly above the ground before fading away. Historians naturally treat these stories with a healthy amount of skepticism. After all, mysterious lights near old burial sites appear in folklore across many cultures. Sometimes the explanation turns out to be swamp gas, sometimes imagination, and sometimes someone simply brought a lantern for a late-night walk. But the legends persist. What's fascinating is that none of these tales specifically mention an underground army. The terracotta warriors remain absent from local folklore for centuries. Historians still debate why that might be. One theory suggests that after the initial destruction of the pits during the Qin dynasty's collapse, the damaged statues became completely buried beneath thick layers of soil. Over time, even the memory of their existence faded. Another possibility is that people occasionally uncovered fragments but never realized how many statues existed beneath the surface. Imagine finding a broken clay head while plowing a field. You might assume it belonged to a small shrine or tomb decoration. Without excavation tools or historical context, it would be almost impossible to guess that thousands more figures waited below. So the centuries pass quietly. Dynasties rise and fall across China. The Han dynasty flourishes, followed by periods of division, then new reunifications under later empires. Trade routes expand across Asia. Gunpowder is invented. Paper spreads knowledge across continents. Meanwhile, beneath the soil near Xi'an, the emperor's army continues standing patiently in darkness. No movement, no sound. Just rows of silent warriors holding positions in a battle formation that will never begin. It's strangely comforting to imagine them there, waiting quietly while the world above changes again and again. Like a secret chapter of history resting just below the surface. And eventually, after more than 2,000 years, that chapter will reopen. Not because someone followed ancient legends. Not because scholars deciphered hidden clues. But simply because a group of farmers needed water. By the time archaeologists fully realize the scale of what lies beneath the farmland, the quiet well digging accident has already turned into one of the most remarkable archaeological projects of the 20th century. You stand again at the edge of the excavation area, except now the landscape looks very different from those first dusty days in 1974. Large protective structures begin rising above the pits, designed to shelter the fragile site from rain, wind, and curious hands. What was once a simple field becomes a vast archaeological complex. And beneath it, the army continues appearing. Carefully, slowly, row by row. The first and largest area uncovered becomes known as Pit 1. When you look across it now, it feels almost endless. Thousands of warriors fill the long corridors, standing shoulder to shoulder in battle formation. The pit stretches about 230 meters in length, longer than 2 full football fields placed end to end. At roughly 62 meters wide, it's large enough that the far end appears slightly hazy from a distance. If ancient generals could see it today, they might nod approvingly at the tidy organization, or possibly complain about the soldiers refusing to move. Archaeologists quickly realize the warriors here represent the main infantry force of the emperor's underground army. The front rows contain lightly armored soldiers positioned as a protective vanguard. Behind them stand deeper ranks of infantry arranged in organized files. And further back still are the chariots and their clay horses. The entire layout resembles a real Xi'an battlefield formation. Historians still debate whether the design reflects an actual historical army that once served the emperor, or whether it represents an idealized military arrangement imagined by imperial planners. Either way, the level of planning is extraordinary. But Pit 1 turns out to be only the beginning. Not far away, archaeologists uncover another large excavation area, Pit 2. This pit reveals something slightly different. Instead of long lines of infantry alone, Pit 2 contains a mixed force, archers kneeling in formation, cavalry units with mounted horses, and chariots arranged in compact groups ready for maneuvering. The kneeling archers are particularly fascinating. Their statues are positioned with one knee on the ground, bodies leaning slightly forward as if preparing to fire crossbows. And here's a charming little detail. Their posture actually helps support the weight of the statue during firing, which may explain why so many of these figures survived intact compared to some of the standing warriors. Ancient ergonomics at work. Some archaeologists jokingly say the kneeling archers look like they're patiently waiting for instructions that are 2,000 years overdue. But they hold their positions perfectly. Then comes Pit 3, the smallest but perhaps most intriguing section. This area contains far fewer statues, only a few dozen, but their arrangement suggests something important. The warriors here include high-ranking officers positioned around what appears to be a command chariot. Historians believe Pit 3 functioned as the headquarters of the underground army. If Pit 1 is the battlefield and Pit 2 the reserve forces, Pit the 3rd of May represent the command center where generals directed the fight. Except of course, there was never meant to be a fight. The army existed solely to guard the emperor's spirit. Another curious discovery soon appears among the statues. Many warriors still hold the shapes of their weapons in their hands. But the actual bronze weapons are sometimes missing from those grips. Archaeologists eventually uncover large numbers of these weapons scattered throughout the pits: spears, halberds, swords, and crossbow triggers. More than 40,000 bronze arrowheads are eventually recovered from the site. That number alone gives a sense of the enormous planning involved. Imagine organizing the production, transport, and placement of tens of thousands of weapons, just for statues. One quirky detail researchers notice is that many arrowheads were manufactured in small batches with slight variations in size and markings. Some carry inscriptions identifying specific workshops. It's almost like ancient branding. Arrowheads by Workshop 7. Guaranteed to frighten your enemies and last 2 millennia underground. Of course, not every statue emerges from the ground perfectly preserved. Many were damaged when the wooden roofs collapsed long ago. Archaeologists spend months carefully collecting fragments and reassembling them like enormous clay puzzles. Sometimes a warrior must be rebuilt from dozens of separate pieces. Other times only the legs remain, the upper body lost to ancient destruction. But with patience, many statues stand again. You walk along the viewing platform and notice something else. The expressions on the soldiers' faces seem oddly calm. None of them look angry. None look terrified. Instead, their faces carry a quiet focus, as though they are simply doing their duty. Perhaps that's exactly how the craftsmen imagined them. Historians still argue whether the statues were meant to represent ideal soldiers rather than realistic portraits. In ancient cultures, military virtue often emphasized discipline, composure, and loyalty. So these calm expressions might reflect the qualities Qin Shi Huang wanted in the army guarding him forever. Looking across the pits now, you can almost feel that discipline lingering in the air. Thousands of warriors, silent, patient, standing exactly where ancient artisans placed them more than 20 centuries ago. And the remarkable truth is, archaeologists are still discovering new details about them even today. You keep moving slowly along the edge of the excavation hall, and by now the Terracotta Army begins to feel less like a mysterious discovery and more like a vast underground workshop frozen in time. Because the more archaeologists study the warriors, the more they realize something fascinating. This army wasn't made by one sculptor. It was made by an entire industrial system. Thousands of craftsmen must have worked on the project over many years. And the statues themselves quietly reveal how that process probably worked. If you look carefully, the warriors share certain repeating features, almost like components assembled in stages. Historians believe the bodies were produced using a modular method. Legs were made in molds. Torsos were built from standardized forms. Arms were attached separately. Then came the most important step: the heads. Each head was sculpted individually, shaped by hand to give every warrior a slightly different appearance. That's why when you walk past rows of statues, you notice something surprising. No two faces look exactly alike. Some soldiers have narrow eyes and sharp cheekbones. Others have fuller faces or thicker mustaches. One warrior looks stern, another appears almost thoughtful, a few even seem mildly bored, which is understandable after 2,000 years of standing still. Researchers once joked that somewhere in the army there might be a clay soldier silently thinking, "I signed up for 3 years of service, not 20 centuries." Of course, those expressions were carefully crafted by artisans who likely never imagined their work would still be admired thousands of years later. After sculpting, the statues were fired in large kilns to harden the clay. Once cooled, they were painted in bright colors using natural pigments. And this is one of the most surprising things about the Terracotta Army. Originally, the warriors were not dull brown like they appear today. They were vibrant. Armor plates were painted in shades of red, green, and blue. Robes displayed patterns and colored trim. Skin tones were carefully applied to faces and hands. Imagine walking into the pits shortly after the army was completed. Instead of rows of earth-colored statues, you would see a colorful military formation glowing under torchlight. It probably looked more like a ceremonial parade than the quiet archaeological site you see today. Unfortunately, those pigments proved extremely fragile. When statues were first exposed to modern air during excavation, the ancient paint began peeling away almost immediately. Within minutes, colors that survived underground for 2,000 years could crumble into dust. It's a heartbreaking moment archaeologists still talk about. Some early discoveries revealed stunning paintwork, only for it to vanish before conservation methods were ready. Since then, researchers have developed special chemical treatments to stabilize pigments as soon as statues are uncovered. Thanks to those techniques, a few warriors still preserve faint traces of their original color. You can sometimes see hints of purple, red, or green lingering on armor fragments. It's like catching a brief glimpse of the army as it once looked. Historians still argue whether the colors held symbolic meanings or simply reflected realistic military clothing of the Qin dynasty. Ancient Chinese armies did use colored garments and banners to distinguish units. But exact interpretations remain uncertain. Another fascinating discovery comes from the tiny inscriptions hidden on some statues. Certain pieces contain marks carved or stamped by the craftsmen who made them. These inscriptions sometimes include workshop names or individual artisan signatures. In other words, These statues quietly carry the fingerprints of the workers who created them. One scholar once described the army as the largest signed artwork in human history. You can imagine a craftsman leaning over a clay torso, carefully adding a small mark before sending the piece to the kiln. Maybe it served as a quality check. Maybe it simply recorded who made which parts. Either way, those marks survived the centuries. And they remind you that behind every warrior statue stood a real person shaping the clay. Many of those workers were likely ordinary laborers recruited from across the Qin Empire. Some may have been skilled artisans from pottery workshops. Others may have learned the craft during the construction itself. Historians still debate whether some workers were prisoners or forced laborers, a common practice for massive imperial projects in ancient China. But the craftsmanship suggests at least part of the workforce included highly trained specialists. After all, producing thousands of life-sized statues requires extraordinary skill. Even today, replicating a terracotta warrior using traditional techniques takes months of careful work. Yet the Qin workshops produced thousands. The entire project probably lasted several decades, beginning when Qin Shi Huang first became king of Qin as a teenager and continuing through his reign as emperor. Imagine spending your entire career shaping pieces of an army that would never move. That's dedication to the job. And yet, somehow, those craftsmen succeeded in building one of the most astonishing artistic achievements in human history. A silent army, individually sculpted, carefully painted, standing patiently beneath the earth until the modern world finally rediscovered them. And the deeper archaeologists dig into the site, the clearer it becomes that this army might only be a small part of the emperor's enormous underground empire. You begin to realize something slightly unsettling as you linger above the excavation pits. The Terracotta Army is enormous. Thousands of statues, several massive pits, an entire underground battlefield. And yet, archaeologists are fairly certain this army represents only a small portion of Qin Shi Huang's burial complex. The emperor's tomb itself still sits nearby beneath that quiet grassy mound you imagined earlier. And according to historical accounts, and modern surveys, the structure surrounding it may stretch across dozens of square kilometers. In other words, the Terracotta warriors might be just one district in a much larger underground empire. Once archaeologists started exploring the wider area, they began discovering more strange additions to the emperor's afterlife world. Not far from the warrior pits, they uncovered statues of acrobats and entertainers. Unlike the soldiers, these figures appear shirtless and muscular, posed as if performing athletic feats. Their bodies are sculpted with careful attention to anatomy, suggesting they represent strongmen or performers from imperial court entertainments. Apparently, even an emperor ruling in the afterlife might want something interesting to watch after dinner. Another excavation revealed terracotta officials and bureaucrats, standing in formal robes. These figures are much calmer in appearance than the warriors. Instead of gripping weapons, they seem to be quietly waiting for administrative duties. Which makes sense. Running an empire, even an underground one, requires paperwork. Historians sometimes joke that somewhere in the afterlife Qin Shi Huang expected tax reports to arrive promptly. Then there are the terracotta horses and stables found in nearby pits. Hundreds of clay horses were buried alongside the soldiers, complete with carefully modeled harnesses. Some appear attached to chariots, while others may have represented cavalry mounts. Each horse stands slightly smaller than a real animal but still impressively detailed. You can almost imagine the underground complex as a complete royal capital. Soldiers guard the gates. Officials manage the bureaucracy. Entertainers provide performances. Horses wait in their stables. And at the center of it all rests the emperor himself. Historians still argue whether Qin Shi Huang truly believed his spirit would rule this underground world or whether the tomb was primarily a symbolic display of power. Ancient Chinese burial traditions often included objects meant to serve the dead in the afterlife. But the scale of Qin Shi Huang's project goes far beyond typical tomb practices. No previous ruler had ever attempted something this large. One particularly strange discovery comes from pits containing bronze waterfowl, cranes and ducks, standing beside stone riverbeds. At first archaeologists were puzzled. Why place birds near artificial streams underground? Then researchers realized the design might represent the emperor's royal gardens. Even in the afterlife, Qin Shi Huang apparently wanted peaceful landscapes. Perhaps after spending eternity ruling clay armies and ghostly officials, a quiet garden stroll seemed like a good idea. You can picture it now. The emperor wandering past bronze cranes while his terracotta soldiers continue standing at attention somewhere beyond the hills. Another remarkable object discovered near the tomb complex is a set of 2 elaborate bronze chariots. Unlike the terracotta figures, these chariots were crafted from bronze and decorated with gold and silver inlays. Each one was pulled by 4 bronze horses and contained intricate details such as parasols, reins, and tiny driver figures. Historians believe these chariots were ceremonial vehicles meant to accompany the emperor's spirit during travels in the afterlife. Which raises an amusing thought. Imagine the emperor's ghost climbing into a miniature bronze carriage and setting off across the underworld. It's either majestic, or the most elaborate toy set ever built for a monarch. Perhaps both. And yet the biggest mystery remains untouched. That central burial mound. Despite decades of research, archaeologists have not opened the emperor's main tomb chamber. Modern technology has allowed scientists to scan the mound using radar and other instruments, revealing possible underground structures. These surveys suggest large chambers exist beneath the hill, consistent with Sima Qian's ancient descriptions. But excavation has been postponed again and again. One major concern is preservation. If the tomb contains delicate artifacts, sudden exposure to air could damage them instantly, just as happened with the painted warriors when they were first uncovered. Another concern involves the mercury levels detected in the soil around the mound. If the ancient historian's story about rivers of mercury is even partially true, opening the tomb could present serious environmental and health risks. Historians still argue whether modern technology is advanced enough to safely explore the chamber. For now, the emperor continues resting undisturbed. 2,000 years after his burial, his final secrets remain sealed beneath that grassy hill. Meanwhile, the Terracotta Army keeps its silent watch nearby. Thousands of soldiers standing exactly where ancient craftsmen placed them. Patient, unmoving, still guarding an emperor whose underground empire might be far larger than anything we've uncovered so far. And as calm evening light fades over the excavation site, you begin to sense that the greatest mysteries of this ancient discovery may still lie beneath the earth, waiting quietly for the distant future. You stand quietly at the edge of the viewing platform one last time, letting your eyes drift across the silent rows of warriors. After everything you've imagined, the craftsman shaping clay, the emperor planning his eternal empire, the centuries of darkness underground, the scene now feels strangely peaceful. The soldiers remain exactly where they were placed more than 2,000 years ago. Patient, still, unbothered by the passage of time. And the more you think about it, the more remarkable their long sleep truly becomes. For centuries, dynasties rose and fell across China. Empires expanded, fractured, and rebuilt themselves. New inventions reshaped daily life. Roads shifted, cities grew. Yet beneath quiet farmland near Xi'an, the Terracotta Army continued standing in perfect formation, unseen and undisturbed. Historians still marvel at that silence, because very few discoveries in human history remain hidden for so long while preserving such extraordinary detail. Thousands of life-sized figures survived underground through wars, floods, earthquakes, and the slow drift of centuries. It almost feels as though the army itself had remarkable patience, waiting calmly until the moment someone happened to dig in exactly the right spot. Of course, the modern world eventually arrived. Today, the excavation site has become one of the most famous archaeological locations on Earth. Visitors from every corner of the world travel to stand where you're standing now, gazing down at the silent formations. The site even earned recognition as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1987, ensuring international protection and study. And yet, despite all the attention, the Terracotta Army still keeps many of its secrets. Archaeologists continue working slowly, carefully uncovering new figures and fragments. Conservation teams experiment with improved techniques to preserve the remaining paint and delicate materials. Every few years, another small discovery adds to the story. A new statue, a previously hidden inscription, a slightly different style of armor or weapon. Each one feels like a quiet whisper from the ancient craftsmen who built this army. Sometimes researchers even discover new pits that expand the known boundaries of the complex, which means the underground empire surrounding Qin Shi Huang might still hold surprises waiting beneath the soil. Historians still argue whether future excavations will eventually reveal additional armies, palaces, or structures hidden nearby. But for now, the emperor's central tomb remains sealed. And perhaps that's fitting, because part of the magic of this place comes from what we don't yet know. The Terracotta Army offers a glimpse into an ancient imagination, a ruler so determined to maintain power after death that he ordered an entire army built from clay. It sounds almost unbelievable. Yet here it stands, row after row. Thousands of silent guardians stretching across the earth beneath a modern roof of steel and glass. You take one last slow look across the formation. The warriors face east, just as they did when the craftsmen first placed them there during the 3rd century BCE. Their armor remains carefully sculpted. Their hands still hold the shapes of long-lost weapons. Their calm expressions haven't changed in more than 20 centuries. Perhaps somewhere among them stands a soldier whose clay face still carries the faintest hint of color from the day he was painted. Perhaps another warrior still bears the tiny carved signature of the artisan who shaped him. And perhaps beneath the nearby hill, the emperor himself still rests quietly within chambers no modern person has entered. The air inside the museum feels cool and steady, and the low murmur of distant visitors fades into a gentle background hush. In a way, the Terracotta Army has become exactly what its creators intended. A place of watchful stillness, a silent guard, a reminder that even the most powerful emperors eventually become part of history, while the things they build continue telling stories long after they're gone. Now, as the lights grow softer and the imagined dust of ancient workshops drifts gently away, you let the image of those endless rows fade slowly into the quiet. The soldiers remain where they have always been, standing, waiting, keeping watch beneath the earth. And somewhere in that deep stillness, the ancient empire finally rests. As the night settles in your imagination, the vast excavation hall grows quieter and quieter. The footsteps of visitors fade, and the gentle echo of voices dissolves into a distant hum. The warriors remain. Their clay armor catches the soft light, and their shadows stretch long across the ancient corridors. You imagine the cool underground air drifting through the pits, moving slowly between the ranks of statues. No wind, no urgency, just a calm, patient silence that has existed here for centuries. Beyond the excavation halls, the grassy mound of the emperor's tomb rests peacefully under the open sky. Trees sway gently above it. Stars drift across the quiet darkness. Whatever secrets lie inside that hill remain undisturbed, waiting perhaps for another distant generation to discover them. But for now, the ancient emperor, his silent army, and the forgotten craftsmen who shaped them can rest exactly where history placed them. And as your thoughts slow and the images soften, the terracotta soldiers fade back into the quiet earth where they stood for so long. Still, patient, guarding a story that traveled across 20 centuries just to reach you tonight. End of script. Sweet dreams.